The lobby gleamed like a palace that morning. Sunlight spilled through the towering glass windows, making the polished marble floors shine so brightly that they looked untouched. People hurried past in expensive suits and crisp dresses, their heels clicking in sharp rhythms against the ground. Security guards stood tall, their eyes scanning for threats, while receptionists answered phones with voices rehearsed for efficiency but not kindness. And somewhere, on the edge of all this luxury, stood Samuel. His uniform was plain, the color faded from years of washing. His shoes squeaked faintly on the floor as he pushed his mop forward, then back, wiping away footprints no one would remember making. Most people barely noticed him. If they did, it was only to step around him, sigh when his mop slowed their stride, or drop a crumpled tissue in his path. But Samuel wasn't bitter. He had long ago accepted that some people see the world as divided, those worth noticing, and those who exist in the background. He was used to being in the background. Yet in his quiet way, Samuel paid attention to everything. The faces, the footsteps, the stories people carried but never spoke out loud. That's why he noticed her. The revolving doors whooshed open, and a woman stepped into the lobby. She was neatly dressed, holding a folder so tightly against her chest that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted around, desperate yet cautious. She moved with hesitation, pausing at every sign, every person. And when she finally reached the reception desk, Samuel stopped mopping to watch. "Excuse me," the woman mouthed, her lips forming the words with care. But no sound came. The receptionist frowned, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. "Yes, what is it?" the woman repeated herself, but again, silence. She gestured frantically at the folder, then began moving her hands in quick, graceful motions. Sign language, but the receptionist only looked confused. I don't understand you," the receptionist said slowly, already turning back to her paperwork. "You'll have to write it down or something. I don't have time for this." The woman's face fell, her shoulders slumped. She tried again, more desperate, but people waiting in line behind her began to groan impatiently. A businessman muttered, "Some of us have meetings to get to." Another sighed loudly, as if her struggle was an inconvenience. Heat rose in Samuel's chest. He gripped the mop handle tighter, remembering his sister Lily, born deaf, mocked by neighbors, ignored by teachers. He remembered watching her cry when people turned away, when they refused to see her humanity because they couldn't hear her voice. That memory alone was enough. Leaving his mop by the wall, Samuel walked toward the desk. The woman noticed him first. She seemed startled at first, but then her eyes locked on his, and something softened. Samuel raised his hand slowly and signed, "Do you need help?" The change in her face was instant, like a candle being lit in the dark. Relief, hope, gratitude. She signed back quickly, "Yes. Meeting. I don't know where." She held out the letter with trembling hands. Samuel glanced at it. The name of a high-ranking executive was typed at the top. He nodded and signed, "Follow me. I'll show you." The receptionist blinked in surprise. The businessman scoffed under his breath. But Samuel didn't care. He walked slowly, making sure she kept up, guiding her down the long corridor. And for the first time that morning, the woman walked with her shoulders straight, her steps steady. She wasn't alone anymore. Neither of them knew that someone was watching. From the 20th floor balcony, CEO Richard Cole stood with his arms crossed, observing the flow of visitors. He was a man whose presence filled every room he entered, a man feared more than admired. Employees whispered stories of his ruthlessness, of the way he cut costs and dismissed people without hesitation. But right now, Richard wasn't focused on the profits or the charts. He was focused on a janitor leading a deaf woman down the hall. He had seen the receptionist brush her aside. He had seen the businessmen roll their eyes. He had seen the frustration on her face. But what caught him most was the moment Samuel raised his hands and spoke her language. In that instant, Richard saw something he hadn't seen in years: humanity. The deaf woman finally reached her meeting. Before she went inside, she turned to Samuel, eyes glistening with tears, and signed, "Thank you. You saw me when no one else did." Samuel smiled softly, nodded, and returned to his mop. But Richard Cole couldn't forget. Hours later, Samuel was called to the CEO's office. He had never been upstairs before. His palms were sweaty as he stepped into the sleek room with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Richard sat at his desk, his piercing eyes studying the janitor. "Sit," the CEO said. Samuel perched on the edge of the chair, cap in his hands, heart pounding. I saw what you did this morning, Richard began. Why? Samuel hesitated. She needed help. No one understood her. You did, Richard pressed. How? My sister, Samuel said quietly. She was born deaf. People used to ignore her. So I learned to sign. I didn't want her to feel alone in this world. Richard leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he said, do you realize that in 5 minutes, you showed more leadership than some of my executives do in a year? Samuel blinked. I was just helping. Richard's gaze softened. No, you were doing what too many of us forget, seeing people. Treating them with dignity. He paused, his voice low but firm. You reminded me of something I've lost along the way. The next day, everything changed. The CEO announced a new inclusivity program, free sign language classes for employees, mandatory sensitivity training, and a policy that no visitor should ever be dismissed or ignored. At the heart of this program was Samuel, who suddenly found himself teaching executives how to say hello, thank you, and you matter with their hands. At first, Samuel felt out of place, standing before people who had once walked past him without a glance. But when he saw their awkward, fumbling hands trying to spell words, he smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Word spread beyond the company. The deaf visitor, who turned out to be a representative of a global go, praised the experience publicly, highlighting the janitor who had helped her. News outlets picked up the story. People online began sharing it, calling Samuel a hero. But for Samuel, the real reward came one evening when he sat with his sister Lily at their small kitchen table. He told her the story, how he had signed for a stranger, how it had changed everything. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table, signing, you always said learning for me was worth it. Now the whole world knows it too. Samuel laughed softly, his heart swelling. I didn't do it for the world. I did it because no one deserves to feel invisible. And maybe that was the lesson. Not just for the deaf visitor. Not just for the CEO. But for everyone. Because in a world obsessed with titles, money, and power, it was the janitor who reminded them all of the greatest truth. Kindness is the only language that doesn't need translation. So the next time you pass someone you think is invisible, a janitor, a guard, a stranger on the street, remember Samuel. Remember that greatness is not about being noticed. It's about noticing others. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can echo through the tallest buildings, reaching even the highest office.